coming to you live from the heart of the free state of New Hampshire. This is The Independents with Carla Gericke. And now, here's your host, Carla Gericke.
Hey guys, and welcome to the launch of The Independents, which, can kind of go both ways. So if you're listening carefully, it could be both independence, which of course is sort of my shtick. My website, carlagericke.com, is called The Art of Independence. And with that, I mean literally everything that has to do with self-empowerment and decentralization and self-actualization. And then, of course, the independence, I guess, this is going to be a hard one, is actually also known as the Undeclared, and it is the largest group of voters, if we're looking at groups of voters, here in New Hampshire. And I thought it might be interesting just to kick off today and talk a little bit about that voting group, right? But also I wanted to let you know what else will be coming up today. So one of the little gimmicky things I thought we might start to do is I'm going to introduce an egg index, much like The Economist had the Big Mac index over the years. I think it'll be interesting to start to track egg prices, to have discussions about why things go up, why they go down, what is monetary policy, and really help to educate all the viewers out there and folks who follow along to help you understand the reasons why I've come to many of my positions. Also today, I will be giving you a quick recap of the Nackey Loeb First Amendment Award, which took place last Thursday over at St. Anselm's. I'm going to dive into whether the COVID restrictions were good for us or bad for us. You guys tell me what your experience was. And then we will also be discussing a 3D printed house, the first one that has been printed here in the great state of New Hampshire. It's right here in Manchester, and there will be an open house for that tomorrow on Thursday from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. All right, so why call my show The Independents? Well, because apparently I wanted to find something harder to say than 200,000th signer, because that one was also a hard one to do over the years. All right, so the thoughts here are, we're kind of caught up in this vibe, for lack of a better term, between this like really far-flung edges of extremism, like extreme left-wing, extreme right-wing, and I think the average voter here in New Hampshire is actually sort of exhausted by that, right? Like we've been caught up in these kind of echo chambers. People are just really mad. They're very nasty, honestly. And I personally think we can do better. I think most of us are inclined in life to be sort of easygoing on one thing and kind of like a stickler on the other thing and whatever, and that we're not really caught up in these sort of crazy extremes. And so I would like to be the voice for the common sense granite staters here in the great state of New Hampshire. So, registered groups, so registered Republicans and Democrats, this may actually even surprise you. Registered Democrats in New Hampshire hover around 28% of voters, and for Republicans, it's about 33%. And honestly, those numbers, which I pulled off the AI this morning, so take it with a pinch of salt, because it appears to me at a minimum that the LLMs are just happily starting to make up crazier and crazier stuff. And if you are someone who's following along on the AI, I mean, we know there's going to be economic impacts. We're starting to see layoffs. Amazon just announced layoffs, several other places. races. We're going into the Christmas season, so this is usually the time of year that those things don't actually happen. So I do think it is a leading indicator of more economic woes heading our way. And of course, had you been listening to me for the past 15 years, those economic woes would perhaps make more sense for you, and you may possibly even have hedged a little bit against it so that your eggs aren't so expensive. All right, so 28% Democrats, 33% Republicans here in New Hampshire. The Undeclareds, which is the official name for independents here in New Hampshire, it hovers around 40%. So we are the biggest group of unregistered voters. And again, I think that is because New Hampshire is uniquely the way it is. We Granite Staters are uniquely the way we are. And we want to keep our options open. We want to look at each candidate on the merits, and we want to go, okay, I think this person's better than this person. Also, because New Hampshire tends to have open primaries, meaning that you as an undeclared may go in. I believe the Democrats actually have a closed primary. I would have to go double check that. But at least on the Republican side, to the best of my knowledge, you can go in that morning. Sorry, I'm going to back up. I think for primaries, actually, you do have to be a registered voter in that party. But in New Hampshire, you can actually declare that morning, say you want to pull a Democrat or a Republican ballot, join basically for the time you're voting, and then when you leave, you go back and you ask them to take you off that list. So there is some flexibility here that is naturally built into how it works here. Now, if you're watching this, today is Wednesday in October. The elections in the city of Manchester will be taking place November 4th, and it is a citywide election that is for school board voting and for the mayor. The current mayor race is the sitting mayor, Jay Ruiz. And he is being opposed, or the person running against him's name is Jess Spiller, I believe. And Jay has done a pretty good job as mayor. Why do I say that? For the most part, at least for any complaints that I was putting in any of the ticketing systems, things were taken care of, except my front lawn that someone came and chopped entirely down, but let's put a pin in that one. I think the most troubling thing Jay has actually done as mayor was to be the dividing or the final vote on a very large $10 million plus bond. I don't think that was good stewardship of the city's money, of our money as taxpayers. But I do still think he is a much better candidate than the woman running against him. They have had some debates, which I'm sure you could find on YouTube if you're interested, but do go and mark your calendar for those citywide elections that are coming up. There are some good candidates I mentioned last week in some of the wards, Ward 10, Ward 11, we have a great guy, so hopefully he will continue. But do go do your homework and make sure you get out and vote in the city. Why? Because we don't get to complain if we're not participating. And we are in this very sort of dynamic time where there are several very big problems with the school system in New Hampshire, citywide, statewide. There's all the funding. There was the Claremont decision. The schools are sucking more than 50% of the property taxes you currently pay are going to the schools here in Manchester, where the children are graduating without an ability to read and write. And you, like me, must believe we can do better than that. So Jay Ruiz, I think, would earn my vote as mayor. Definitely Will Infantine and Joe Kelly Levasseur. They, are the at-large candidates. And then go and look at your specific ward and make sure you get out and vote. All right, so what else can I tell you about independents? So the undeclareds, so to put those percentages in sort of numbers, right? So in New Hampshire, we have 972,000 voters. So let's just call it 1 million to make it easy, right? So out of that, the undeclareds are about 400,000, about 40% of the voters. So we actually are the reason why New Hampshire is a purple state. And it is also the reason why we are now again in play. So this week I saw Ray Buckley, who is the chairman of the Democratic Party here in New Hampshire, Ray, as some of us like to call him, came out and actually said, oh, now suddenly he cares about first in the nation again. What is that? So New Hampshire typically was, after the Iowa caucus, New Hampshire has first in the nation voting. That was where we have our primary, where people can go and they vote for their candidates, where, you know, way back in the day, let's say in 2008 and 2012, when I moved to New Hampshire, we had Ron Paul, for example, who I would say is a libertarian light candidate at the time, anti-war, pro-gun. I know that's a hard one for people to keep straight in their heads, but those two things actually go together, because it's much harder to suppress your citizens if they too are armed, right? Which is something we have discovered here in America, and it is the reason why I believe America is the last bastion of freedom. We are seeing, thought police, speech police, all of those things in the UK, Canada, and in Australia, all Commonwealth countries, of course, that were disarmed over years. So we as the undeclareds, we hold a lot of sway here, especially with something like first in the nation. So Ron Paul, of course, 2008 and 2012 came second on the Democrat and the Republican slate. So that was something that was sort of like a leading indicator for people who follow politics, and of course was the reason he was so vilely marginalized, right? And one might even say that someone like President Trump is an outcome from that whole line, including how libertarians have started to sort of dominate on social media in many ways, because so many of us are also techies. So the undeclared voter is New Hampshire's true independents, right? And we are the ones who are going to be in play here if the Democrats also push for first in the nation status. So you all might recall that in the last election, President Biden did not stump here at all. He did not once come to New Hampshire. He basically just ignored us entirely, which, is kind of insulting, but also sort of indicative. Of course, now looking back, we realize that he probably was incapable. In fact, today, the big scandal about the auto pen is really starting to bubble up, where people are saying, hold on a second, who was actually running the country for the past 4 years when President Biden was clearly intellectually incapacitated? And for people who, were watching my show, know I was talking about that back then because my sister does a lot of dementia work. I'm kind of familiar with that landscape, and you could see it from him falling off his bicycle in front of, all the media and everyone pretending like that didn't happen, or falling up or down the stairs of Air Force One how many times, or going on The View and sort of slurring his words and everyone being like, what is he saying now? Dog-faced pony soldier. You know what I mean? All right, so if we push first in the nation here, again, that makes New Hampshire a very powerful player in politics. And it does give us as independent voters a very outsized sway to really indicate to the rest of the country which way we should be leaning. So the undeclareds have actually dipped a little from 2024. And I think that is why the number on the Republican side actually surprised me a little bit more. I thought it was interesting that the LLM Grok specifically did actually specifically cite the influx of libertarian-leaning transplants of the Free State Project that have concentrated down here, especially in these areas, to sort of help bolster that 40% number. So independent voters also are not stereotypical low info voters. Like, we're the ones who are actually kind of looking a little more carefully, right? Because what you have with the declared sides, so with the Republicans and the Democrats, these are typically sort of staunch supporters, the card carriers of their parties, right? And oftentimes those voters are pretty checked out and they just know, hey, I'm going to go in the ballot box and I'm going to vote down ticket for the Republicans. And honestly, if you are voting Republican, you should vote down ticket, because the drop off between the top of the ticket for the governor's race, let's say, to the poor guy who's running in your state ward, who is really there to simply be a citizen's voice at the state house, because we have such a large state house. The drop off from the top of the ticket to the bottom, it can be as much as 30 to 40%. And I think that actually really does harm Republicans in general. But again, as an independent, you want to be looking at the actual candidates. So we are higher information voters. We're more likely to follow the news, to donate, and to volunteer. So we also skew a little younger and have a higher income. And of the 40% that are independent, about 75% do lean one way or the other. So you're more inclined to vote one way or the other, but you still choose to define yourself as someone who is outside this left-right paradigm. And I think that's a smart way to roll. A few key issues, and then I will move on to the Nackey Loeb. So key issues often for people like us are the economy and inflation. You know, we understand, hey, we're running our own household budgets, and if we have to, you know, not run up insane amounts of debt, then we actually expect our government to not do that either. We care about government spending and taxes. We care about foreign policy and security and border security. So the number one at 22% is the economy and inflation, and those are the things that drive people like us. All right, so quirks and trends, just a sort of general thing here. So there have been different pushes to sort of try and limit the sway of this sort of middle group who can get split one way or the other. There was HB 172 this last session in 2025 that wanted to restrict same-day primary voting for undeclareds. So that would kind of keep party purity. I don't really like that idea. That backlash could fuel growth. And undeclareds are basically the average Granite Stater, and that's the voice I want to talk to. Because why? Because the following: our friggin' eggs cost too much. So I will be working on actually getting graphics and stuff integrated into the show as well. But I did want to just kind of talk a little bit about the egg prices, because it is an indicator that all of us in households can understand as something that shows us the dilution and devaluation of the dollar and makes the case for things like gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And so in 2022, egg prices were $8.86. They actually dipped in 2023 to $2.80. Then in 2024 went up to $3.20. And as of October this year, so right now, these are for, just a grade A large eggs per dozen are currently at $3.60. And actually, it's a little higher here in New Hampshire, actually just over $4. Why does this matter? Because it matters because we are being bled dry. If you feel like you're permanently becoming just slightly poorer, or maybe not so slightly poorer, or like every time you go to the grocery store, you're like, oh, you thought it was a $30 grocery run and then it's $100. I mean, we've all had that feeling. It is because of the way we are running the economy here in the United States. And we cannot have unlimited money printing, dilution of the dollar with no consequences. So if you're one of these people sitting around going, I want free stuff, it's not free. It makes all of our eggs more expensive. Okay, let's talk about the Nackey Loeb Awards. I'm just going to go over this quickly. It was last Thursday at St. Anselm. Great turnout, very sort of like a nice, late afternoon suit and tie kind of event. I did a brief My Living Experiment, which are the daily lives that I do on X. From there, from the outside, you can go find that on my X profile under my name. The two winners, briefly, the first one is Sean Young, like the actress, but a dude, not a lady. He was the owner of the Levitt's Country Bakery in Conway, and he was nominated because a school teacher, together with her school students, decided to design this artwork on the front of his bakery, which were literally little mountains of donuts. And the city, for whatever reason, it must have been some, obstreperous zoning person, was just like, no, that is not art, and we're going to sue you. And they sued 3 times. They appealed all the way to a federal court to say that this bakery needs to take down their school's artwork because the zoning board didn't like it. So the zoning board, for whatever reason, dug in, and then gratefully this gentleman, Sean Young, too dug in. And I thought it was really cool. Turns out the person or the organization that represented him, who took the case all the way, was IJ, the Institute of Justice, which is actually a libertarian think tank that has represented many, many people that I personally know and done many of the cases that you yourself may be familiar with, including Kelo, which was the eminent domain case out of Connecticut, and I believe the Heller case as well out of DC, although I stand to be corrected on that. So IJ, or libertarians, or independents, or the common sense folk who kind of go, should the zoning board of some town be able to be like, you can't paint that on your own building? No, they probably should not. That's probably too much power. So anyway, Sean Young fought it. The town deemed the mural an unapproved commercial sign and sought to have it removed. Young sued, and a judge ruled earlier this year that the town had violated Young's First Amendment rights. So he was the 2025 First Amendment Award winner, Sean Young. The other winner, and it was a designated Quill and Ink Award, went to Melanie Splenda. She is the director of the Granite State News Collaborative, and this is basically where they get together and they sort of share news across different regions to make sure that people can make sure the journalists can, in a timely fashion, get critical information and stories out there. And so that was what happened last week. I thought it was also interesting. The keynote speaker was Jake Sullivan, who is who is the husband of Maggie Goodlander. And so there was definitely like a very, I mean, I'm just going to call it what it is. It had very CIA vibes there for me. Went to Yale, worked in national security. Everything was sort of framed through a national security lens, including these First Amendment awards. But the main thrust or the main note I heard there is, oh, you know what America's number one thing is, which I kind of agree with, is our resilience. But in that was this little note of saying, oh, we got some things wrong over COVID, but, you know, hey, don't blame us. Let's just move on. Let's reset. Let's be resilient and let's go on this different path. And I think there's going to need to be a little more mea culpa, I think, from the establishment to actually acknowledge the ridiculous situation that took place under COVID, because it is now becoming quite clear that the economic impacts of shutting down the economy for a virus, it was a overreach, and it has had extreme impacts that we are now seeing and that we will continue to see. All right, we're up against the time here. So with the last few moments, this was the First Amendment Awards. Let me tell you a little bit about this 3D printed house. It's the first one of its own here in New Hampshire. And here are like 5 or 6 things that make this. So basically how it works is they have a plan, and they have this huge crane with this almost like tube that, imagine a toothpaste tube that is pushing out cement, and then they do it in these coils that form the wall over time. So this 3D printed house, which is for sale for Bitcoin right here in New Hampshire. So reach out to me at carla@porcupinerealestate.com if this sounds great, or come to the open house tomorrow at 4:30. You can find more details about the house online. Just search for 3D printed house, Bitcoin, Manchester, New Hampshire. But this house, this whole way of doing things creates a safer work environment. It requires less labor. It's customized for the site. It's very precise. There's less material waste, and it's cheaper and faster than building a regular home. So I think as we move into the future, which is what New Hampshire is doing, one cool common sense futuristic idea like flying cars at a time, is we're going to start to see more and more of these kinds of houses. All right, that was a lot of talking for the first edition of The Independent. I hope you guys noticed I color coordinated with my intro and outro, and I will see everyone back here again next week for an update on New Hampshire real estate. Thank you.